Morning, everyone. I am Rabbi Jenni for the Assistant Rabbi for Congregation Beth-El, and we are live this morning for a little bit of Pesach Torah, a little bit of Passover learning. I am going to give us a few minutes for others to log on and join us, but I did put into the comments a source sheet that I created since I compiled this a little bit later than when I wanted to ask our administrator for our website to put it up on the Beth-El website. So I'm also making it available here. On the Beth-El website, you can find the scan of the Etz Chaim Chumash, which will have all of what would normally have been read in the synagogue today, both for Torah reading and for Haftarah. So if you'd like to take a look at the whole selection of today's reading on your own time later today, or while Cantor Melissa is doing her Chag Torah chants. You can look for that on our website. For now, the comments marked as from Congregation Beth-El on this video will have the summary of the texts that I'm going to use this morning. Say Chag Sameach. I see Amanda Siegel's already on, probably Miles too. So Chag Sameach to the Siegel family. And give us a couple minutes, see if any others are going to join us, and then I'll get started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning. So again, Chag Sameach, happy Passover to everyone. I hope we are all staying healthy and safe at home. If you go to the comments on this video, you'll see the link to the sheet that I'm going to use with a little bit of selection of different texts that I will use in discussion this morning. Again, if you'd like the scan of the entirety of the first day of Passover reading for Torah reading and for Haftorah from the Etz Chaim, that's on the BEZ website under the Passover resources. It'll say Etz Chaim sheets, and that will be a scan of everything from the Etz Chaim that we would normally have been reading in the synagogue this morning, if you would like to take a look at that. But go ahead and just follow the link on this video for my sheet of a summary of a couple of things that I wanted to talk about this morning. I don't know about you, but I had a very interesting Seder last night, just myself and my husband in our living room, getting to really dive into the Haggadah, of the text of the Haggadah, a little bit more than we normally get to. And there's a first for me as a California native living here in Indianapolis now. I got to have a storm, which was a new experience, getting to hear hail while reading about the plagues in Egypt, including hail. So that was a new experience for me. But something that jumped out at me from the Haggadah last night, which is somewhat in contradiction to the verses that are read for this morning's Torah reading, was the quote of Halach Ma'anya. And Chag Sameach Miki, I see I have the Ashworth joining us too. So the first text I want to take a look at is that very first paragraph of the Magid. After the four questions are read and we begin telling the story, we hold up a matzah and we say, Halach ma'anya di achalu ahavta na be'ar'a de Mitzrayim. This is the bread of destruction, affliction, of poverty that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Which is interesting because it sounds worded that way, it sounds like the matzah was what the Israelites would have been eating while they were slaves in Egypt. It is what they ate in the land of Egypt. And yet we know from this morning's Torah reading, if you go to Exodus chapter 12, verse 34, we all know the story of why do we have matzah? Because the Israelites, when fleeing Egypt after the final plague, didn't have enough time to let that matzah, let their dough rise into bread, and it had to stay as matzah. So it leaves the question, Is the matzah the bread of affliction that was eaten while they were slaves? Or is it instead the bread that they ate as they became free? And I think the answer is, in fact, that it's both. It is on the one side the bread of affliction, and on the other side the bread of freedom. And we'll notice that matzah is really thin. There is just not so much difference as we normally like to think between being enslaved and emburdened and bound and being truly free. There's a concept that the matzah is both sides of that. It is the bread of affliction, and it also the bread of chirutin, the bread of our freedom. And I think that we're reminded today, as we are on the first day of Passover, that it's both. Pesach, to some degree, I'm going to quote one of my teachers, Rabbi David Wolpe here, Pesach, to some degree, is a holiday of the unfinished. We often like to think of it as a holiday of freedom, but it's truly, in reality, it's the holiday of the unfinished. We have ended slavery, and now what? We've started a journey. We're not yet in the land of Israel, if we follow the narrative, we're not yet even at Sinai receiving the Torah. That's not for another 7 weeks, and I'll mention the Omer in a few minutes. We're right now on the precipice. We have received freedom, which at the moment, really all it means for the Israelites is we have received the opportunity to leave the narrowness, but not really any clear idea yet of what we're going to. So we're going to see over the next few weeks, what does that look like? There's a line in Hallel, which I believe Cantor Melissa will be singing for us a little bit later. Min hametzar karati ya, anani b'merchav ya. From the narrow, tight places and distress, I called out to the Lord, I called out to God, and God answered me with relief, is how the translation on Sepharia is brought to us. But there's two roots I want to point to in that verse, because metzar, the word used for distress, should sound familiar to us as we're talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. Metzar, Mitzrayim means narrow space, bound up. And we call out to God for relief, for freedom, and we're answered with merchav. The root rachav means wide, open. At this point, we are in the space of, okay, you can leave the narrow, but we don't yet know what it means. And for a lot of us right now, we're in home, we might still feel bound, and yet in some ways we're more free than we usually are, because we have much more control over what we're doing with our time individually. One of the markers of slavery is that you have no control over your own time. And right now, many of us have a little bit more control over our time, even if we don't have quite as much control of movement and fluidity of movement as we're used to. So we've been offered this opportunity for time, for space, and to use this time that we're at home, not so much as a pause from life and the life that we're used to, but as an opportunity to prepare for it. We've been freed, but we haven't yet reached any kind of destination. Like the Israelites, we are stepping out onto a journey, and we don't know where that journey will end. And so tonight we begin one of my favorite traditions, because it is just so simple and yet so deep. Tonight we begin counting the Omer. For those who do a second Seder, it'll be in your Haggadah toward the end to begin it. Otherwise, you can just simply open a Siddur or have the blessing listed here on this source sheet. But we're commanded in Leviticus when we are reviewing the special holidays, the special times for God, to count. The verse literally says from the Shabbat, but the rabbis in the Talmud interpret that Shabbat to be the first day of Passover. Once we're done with the first day of Passover, we start counting 7 weeks. We count them 1 day at a time, and we count up. Because though the verse has 50 days, often if we're counting, when we know we're looking forward to something, we count down to it. But if we are trying to go through a journey and mark each day to recognize what is different, how have we grown, and what can we add to ourselves in each day, we count up. And so the Omer, we count up as well. Tonight we'll start counting with 1. There's a blessing below that you can say when we get to it either in your Haggadah or on your own. and each day is a new number. It's one more than yesterday. I find that the Omer is a wonderful opportunity to do some self-reflection. You can use it in any way that you want to, because the only expectation from our rabbis and from the Torah is to count it off, to let each day stand on its own and be a little bit different as we go from the journey. We're stepping out into an opportunity for freedom. We're not yet there. We don't yet know what it will fully look like when we get through all of the trials and tribulations that starting out and figuring out our own way will be. But I hope for all of us, as we count up and as we go on our journeys, that we will come out the other end with a little bit more Torah. On 7 weeks from today, we will have Shavuot, where we will celebrate receiving the Torah. And I hope that we can use the next 7 weeks and the time that we have available to us for a little more learning and self-reflection, and that we can come out with a little bit of a stronger bond to Torah than we have had in other years, because we are all always on a journey and always growing. Chag Sameach for those of you who celebrate a second Seder tonight. I hope that you have a wonderful one, whether that be just your household or if you're like me, zooming with family and friends all over the place. I'm going to say Chag Sameach to everyone who has checked in, to the Siegels, to the Ashworths, to Sue Rosenblum, to Nani, and to Cindy Harp, and to Warren Vanover. Chag Sameach to all of you and anyone else who's watching and hasn't commented. I hope you all have a wonderful feast of freedom, even if we're not yet sure what that freedom will bring us. Chag Sameach, and I will see you in a couple of days on Shabbat. 15 minutes at 10:30 for the Pesach edition of Torah Chants Encounters. Chag Sameach. See you soon.